nothing to do with like what is even good. It's just what I personally like. And I say that, it seems so obvious, but I say that because like I hope in my heart of hearts that it gives you and everyone that hears my words in this way forever the feeling that they have the permission to have that much space for their own perspective too. And like there's no version of something that Michael Brower knows or doesn't know that's like gonna set you free if you can find it out. All you have to do is go into your own taste and trust your own taste as a maker, you know?
Yeah.
So that being said, I don't know. I don't really record with a lot of amps these days. I like the I have a bunch of Ampex 351s that I've modified a lot that sound fucking awesome. And like, you don't have to do anything to it. Sometimes I don't even have to compress bass afterwards. It just sounds so good through these things. I have a 1962 P bass, the P bass into the Ampex, and it's done.
Flats, obviously, right?
No.
No, really?
Medium weight round wounds, dude.
Really?
Yeah, it doesn't matter. Nothing matters. It's the pilot, not the plane. And like, if you're in the mix and it's not bassy enough, add bass. If you're in the mix and it's too mid-rangey, filter it. You know, it's like, there really is that simple. And there's that great Duke Ellington quote, right? Like, if it sounds good, it is good.
Yes.
So like that, you know? And I mean, look, like this is also me circumlocuting the fact that I've like spent 20 years of my life actively obsessed about this thing. So I also don't mean to like mitigate the struggles and successes of the beginner in so doing, but like it's just me asking the same questions that anyone that's going to listen to this is going to ask themselves, you know? And so get after it. I don't know. That's what I do. I have a B15 too, but I really find that the more directionality and the more presence and less air I can get around a bass recording, the more overall volume you can get out of it before it starts squaring up. So if you, for example, if you have like a B15, it has a pretty intrinsically like muddy resonance, which is kind of what's great about it, but also just what's true, right? And then if you magnify that by sticking it into a booth that's kind of weird and lumpy, because that's what everybody fucking does, like, then you're going to have to deal with the acoustic power of the bass signal being moved around by an amp that has some nonlinearities in a space that has nonlinearity. So you're going to be decorrelating these things from the direct signal in order to get the maximum RMS out of it, if that's what you're after.
Yeah, it's like there's like less phase coherency and
not just phase coherence, but also like harmonic content, and more specifically non-harmonic content, because it's stuff that isn't endemic. It's not intrinsic to the recording. It's not like intrinsic timbre of the
It's
instrument.
the stuff that's resonating in the room and then coming into the microphone.
And those combinatorially are the things that we've always heard out of these great recordings that we've always valued too, right? Like linearity.
Like Motown was in a room, right? Like,
yeah, exactly. And like pure linearity is what actually people value when they're talking about recording technology. Otherwise, we'd all be recording with Earthworks TC30Ks, and nobody does. You know what I mean? Like you get reference microphones and shit. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I understand. Yeah.
So I don't know.
We like the randomness and the interesting curves and the
that, and also I feel like
frequencies.
there's like a huge music is oddly conservative, and then it's like hugely precedent based. So like, I don't know, I saw somebody post up a fucking ad for a U47 today that was like up for $50,000 as on some like hardy har. But like the reason that a U47 is trying to even command that kind of egregious a price is because of its place in your gestalt. It has this place in your history of what recorded music sounds like. I'm serious, you know? It's like, it's not a microphone. It's also timbrally, emblematically Aretha Franklin and Frank Sinatra and Coltrane and all these incredible records that you've heard. You've had those intrinsic nonlinearities of that device implied across these things that we've grown up with and like made eggs to and made love to and like live with. You know what I mean? So that's why a U47 costs $50,000, not because it's better or worse than any microphone. It's a transducer. It does its job. That's it. And in fact, poorly in some cases, because the parts are hard to find and it's expensive to maintain and noisy. But it's got this connection to this diasporatic importance in our subconscious life. So that's my philosophy on recording bass.
I think that's about everything. Like everyone talks about saturation these days, and I think the reason why we love saturation is because that's the sound of those records that we grew up listening to when it was recorded to tape and all those non-linearities and all that stuff.
That's true.
We love that. We love it because that's all we've been hearing. That's the canon. of modern music that we grew up, from the Beatles to Zeppelin to, whatever.
That's
Rush,
absolutely right.
Prince, all that stuff. Like it just keeps, that's what we grew up loving, and that's why we love that sound, and that's why we love the sound of compression, and that's why records are loud, right?
What's that great Eno quote? He's like, as soon as we overwhelm the limitations of a technology, we will seek to recreate them. Like as soon as we pass beyond the limitations of a form of media, we seek to recreate it nostalgically.
Yeah. That's literally what happened.
Yeah, and I mean, I think again, like not to bag on Earthworks, but to continue the sort of Earthworks metaphor, is that like Pro Tools is so much better, quote unquote, as a recorder than a tape machine is. That's why we have to pull out this old shit, because we're trying to connect it back to an era in which these things were more intrinsically a part of the media, like slew rate transient response of like a Burl versus like a ATR 102 or like a 3M tape machine. Forget it. That's what people are talking about when they're talking about tape compression. It's the overall ballistic reaction of the circuit, right? And like Pro Tools comparatively has just so much faster response. So you have to kind of slow all the shit down and chill it out. Plugins like Soothe exist now, whereas there would have been no real reason for something like that in tape, I
was trying to think. I spoke with Vance Powell, who's done like a lot of the Jack White records.
Sure,
and,
yeah. He's a legend.
And he's awesome. And what the thing that he said that blew my mind was when he was talking about like, why do we love analog gear? It's like it's because we're analog beings. It's like we listen to when a tape machine, tape machines are not even. It's not exactly the same amount of time from start to finish the same way a DAW is, and but we love that because that's like the way we are. Is when you play in a band and you're not playing with a metronome, there's that inherent groove that isn't in a click track. You know what I mean? Like
I do.
That's a lot of what it's about,
That's true, but as a person who like really loves hip hop, I take exception to that as well, because there's programming that feels just as alive. So again, I would say pilot, not the plane.
Well, actually, I wanted to ask you on that note, like with how do you program like this kind of like neo soul staggered tempo shit? How do you make it sound so good, even when it's slowing down, and it's rushing, and it's dragging, and do you have an approach to that?
You mean just like literally like what do I do in order to achieve that sound? Okay. Yeah, well, so
spell it out.
All that stuff is just swing, right? Like it's like varying amounts of nonlinearity against the grid, right? Which is also sort of analogously what Vance is talking about, right? The human thing. And like I've seen great producers also record incredible drummers, by the way, and then beat detective the shit out of it, because that was what was appropriate for the thing too. So
it depends, yeah.
You know what I'm saying? I don't know. I mean, all this shit's so case dependent, but like the next time you're programming a beat, for example, try nudging. If let's just say everything's hard on the grid, I'm going to go ahead and say above or before, back and forward, just to kind of keep it simple. Try nudging the hi-hats 10 milliseconds forward and the snares 10 milliseconds back and the kicks 20 milliseconds back, and see how that feels. You've just engendered like a 30 millisecond difference between the hi-hat and the kick, and a 10 millisecond difference between the snare and the kick, That's just a real oversimplified approach to it, but like even that, something so simple as that will make your recording breathe in a way that it just absolutely was not if you were doing the Giorgio Moroder hard on the grid thing, But there's also a lot of place for that too. Like I love that, and they're like, goddamn, I mean, the birth of hip hop is based on that, right? Like Trans Europe Express and like Planet Rock and all that shit. Like those dudes were using like CV synced drum machines, I do all my sequencing in Pro Tools on the grid like a weirdo, like kind of old school style. I'll import one-shot samples and lay it into the grid because I find that it's a lot easier to get granular control at that level. And I have the ability to sort of audio suite things and delays and render things and kind of keep using it more broadly as the sampler that it is, right? Like in a way, like Pro Tools is a much better version of Machine than Machine is. It's like Machine is redundant, you just don't get pads for the way Pro Tools works.
Right.
You know what I'm saying? So that's kind of how I do it. I'll do a lot of recording of hi-hats and tops and percussion and stuff like that too. And like, A fun trick that you should experiment with is try using loops at non-related tempos. So make a beat at 90, import some percussion at 117, and then sidechain the shit out of it off of the kick, and then just see what happens. Start right there and just see what happens. Sometimes just implying something that's time domain musically related to the original tempo over the top of it will immediately, your brain will put it back into something that is musically regular. Additionally, if it doesn't,
Wow.
you can go one layer down and take a smaller sample of a non-related tempo at a musically related period. So in the same example, make a beat at 90, pull in a percussion sample at 117, sample 2 quarter notes and an eighth note out of that loop, and then loop that, but sample the 2 quarter notes and an eighth note at 90 BPM, even though it's at 117, and then throw that into your loop and see what that sounds like.
Mm-hmm.
Again, I'm just totally using random
Riffing.
Yeah,
Yeah.
random experimental numbers, but like especially layering up like percussion like that can really, really make it feel like Lotus just immediately. You get that like flaming and seasick kind of vibe, and then like I said, like re-superimposing the tempo of the work through sidechain or through editorial means, your brain especially will like filter these things and make them into musical information again if they happen more than once.
Mm-hmm. Right. You play it once, it's a mistake. Play it twice, it's jazz, right?
That's it. Play it 3 times, it's a hit.
Yeah, right. Totally. And once we're on like the rhythm banter, tell me about working with Nate Smith. What was that like?
Yeah, Nate's great, man. We did a lot of records together. We met on Jose's first record for Blue Note again. And then we did that record. We did Takuya Kuroda's first record for Blue Note together. And then when he started doing Kinfolk, he wanted me to do it. So we did the basics at Sear Sound, which is one of my favorite rooms to work in New York. We did it upstairs in the Neve room, not the downstairs like Nora Jones, Sear, Avalon, Sony board. So it was kind of crunchy. And I stuck Nate, I don't know if you've ever been to Sear Sound, but they have that side booth that's kind of small. And I stuck the drums in there and then put Dave Holland and Jay Most and FEMA and Chris and everybody out in the main room. So we could get some real crispy, isolated drums.
Yeah. Oh man, Dave Holland, what a bass player!
He's a
Holy
legend,
shit.
man. Yeah. When I started setting him up, he was just like, "Yeah, I usually just like to do like a 47, like kind of here." And I was like, "Great."
If you say so.
Yeah, I had like my own plan or whatever, and just started getting shit set up. And he was like, "Oh, cool, 47. Yeah, I usually like those right about here." And I was like, "Sounds great, Dave." And just put it where he wanted, and it sounded fucking awesome. It sounded exactly like Dave Holland.
Yeah, man. Working with Nate Smith sounds like a dream. That guy's one hell of a drummer. I wanted to ask you about your Handclap Library because you mentioned this on Kirk's podcast.
Oh shit!
Strong Songs. And
Triple
you
A
mentioned
claps.
you mentioned that there was like a way to find it, and I couldn't find it. I was like, I want to find those claps. You branded it really hard, you know?
Yeah, the only way to find it is me. I'm the gatekeeper. Heather and Sasha both have copies. So what it is my friend Heather Christian, the woman that I was talking about, I just went to the ballet with in Oklahoma, and our dear friend Sasha Brown, who's her guitar player and a genius musician, all have like somehow just like morphologically the perfectly sized hands to collectively make a hand clap. And because he plays guitar, she plays piano and sings, and I play bass, we also experience the pocket in just different enough place that our clap tracks have just the perfect amount of life and the right amount of hand size variation. Like, they're kind of ideal. I don't know, man. And so I have just like, for my part, I have like turned that. We were going to start a fake company called AAA Claps, CLAAAPZ. We're available for hire. Honestly, I think we might do a splice library because it comes up, and like I'm like kind of Wilhelm screaming these claps a little bit because they just fucking sound so fucking good. So they end up in kind of everything. Like I have put those claps into so much stuff, bro.
Time for the splice pack. Let me know when it drops.
I will.
We'll tell the audience.
Fabulous. Yeah, we were gonna make we had like a whole satire, like regional ad, TV ad and shit. It was the whole thing. Yeah.
Also, and you mentioned also that you have like a customized board. Tell me a little bit about that.
I sure do. Yes.